Have you ever remembered something so clearly, so perfectly that you would swear it was true only to find out later that it never actually happened? Not just a small mistake, but a memory shared by thousands, even millions, of other people who all remember the exact same wrong thing. This strange experience has a name. People call it the Mandela effect. And once you learn about it, you will start noticing it everywhere. The story begins in the early 2000s. A woman named Fiona Broome was talking with other people online, and she realized something odd. She clearly remembered Nelson Mandela, the famous South African leader, dying in prison in the 1980s. She remembered news reports about his death. She remembered a speech given by his widow. The problem is, none of that ever happened. Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990, became president of South Africa in 1994, and lived until 2013. But Fiona was not alone. Many other people online said they remembered the exact same false event, with the exact same details. That is when the term Mandela effect was born, used to describe a situation where large groups of people share a memory of something that never actually occurred. Once this idea spread, people started finding more and more examples, and some of them are honestly hard to believe. Take the children's book series about a family of bears. Most people remember the name being spelled one way, but the real spelling has always been slightly different. Thousands of people insist they remember buying the books, reading the name out loud, and seeing it printed that way in stores. Yet, historical records, old book covers, and printing archives all show the same original spelling the whole time. Another famous example involves a well-known board game character, a wealthy man in a top hat and suit. Many people clearly remember him wearing a monocle, a small round eyeglass over one eye. They can describe it in detail, the way it caught the light, the way it looked slightly old-fashioned. But if you look at every official image of this character throughout history, there has never been a monocle. Not once. There are dozens of examples like this. A famous line from a science fiction movie that almost everyone quotes slightly wrong. The exact shade of color on a cartoon character's tail, which people argue about constantly online. Even the way a country's map looks, or where a certain island is located. In every case, it is not just one or two people who are confused. It is large groups of strangers from different countries who have never met each other, all sharing the same incorrect memory with surprising confidence. So, what is actually going on here? Is something strange happening to reality itself, or is there a simpler explanation? To understand this, we first need to understand something important about how memory actually works. Many people imagine memory like a video camera, recording every moment perfectly, ready to be played back later exactly as it happened. But that is not how the brain works at all. Memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain is not pressing play on an old video. It is rebuilding the memory from small pieces, almost like putting together a puzzle using pieces that are not always the right ones. This means memories can be influenced by many things after the event itself. If you see a slightly wrong version of something, like a joke online or a friend's incorrect description, your brain can quietly blend that new information into the original memory without you noticing. Scientists call this source confusion, when your brain forgets exactly where a piece of information came from and simply treats it as part of the original memory. Over time, with enough repetition, this false version can start to feel just as real, just as clear, and just as certain as an actual memory. There is also something called a schema, which is basically a mental shortcut. Your brain loves patterns, and it often fills in gaps using what seems most likely, rather than what is exactly true. If a spelling looks more natural one way, or a character seems like the type who would wear a monocle, your brain quietly assumes that version is correct and stores it that way. This happens automatically without any intention to lie or trick anyone. Scientists have actually tested this in the lab. In several well-known memory experiments, researchers showed people a list of related words, none of which included one specific word. Later, a large number of participants were completely convinced they had seen that missing word, even describing exactly where on the list it appeared. Their brains had filled in a gap using a pattern, and the false memory felt completely real to them. This is very similar to what happens with the Mandela effect, just on a much larger, shared scale, thanks to the internet connecting millions of people who reinforce the same mistake together. Of course, not everyone is satisfied with a scientific explanation. Online, a much stranger theory has become popular. Some people believe the Mandela effect is proof of parallel universes, alternate versions of reality that occasionally overlap or shift. According to this idea, maybe some of us briefly crossed over from a slightly different timeline, one where the spelling was different, or the monocle was real and only some fragments of that other reality stayed behind in our memory. It is a fascinating idea and a fun one to imagine, but it is important to say clearly that mainstream science does not support this explanation. There is no solid evidence of shifting timelines. What we do have strong evidence for is the fact that human memory is far less reliable than most people assume. Maybe that is the real lesson hidden inside the Mandela effect. Not that reality is broken, but that our own minds are much more creative and much more flexible than we like to admit. Every memory you have ever formed has passed through a process of editing, blending, and rebuilding, usually without you ever noticing it happen. The next time you feel completely certain about a small detail from your past, it might be worth pausing for a second and wondering just how much of that memory is real and how much of it your brain quietly built for you. So, have you ever experienced the Mandela effect yourself? Maybe a name, a color, a quote, or a small detail you were absolutely sure about until you discovered you were wrong. Tell us about it in the comments and let's see how many of us share the exact same false memory. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.